you'll get to be weirded out by my not Mac OS situation.
This Fortran you?
So
I think it's MS-DOS. I don't know.
I would be impressed if it was.
cool. So welcome everybody to a website tour with Daniel Miller. For general outline, we'll just kind of spend the hour going through the various iterations, projects, back end, front end of Daniel's sites, and get a tour of it all. So thanks for doing this, Daniel, and we can hop right into it.
Okay. So I basically just created an outline that's based on mostly what tech I was using at the time. It's always, the blog at least has always just been like really just a blog. But I did end up kind of building my own backend CMS for it at one point, and that ran for quite a while. So I'm gonna just go through that, kind of these, it's 19 and a half years old at this point. And then I thought I'd talk about some of my process that I've landed on after 19 and a half years, and then some of my lessons learned.
Awesome.
So hopefully I have most of these open already. The first one's really embarrassing. Well, actually a lot of this is gonna be pretty embarrassing. So let's dive in. I discovered blogs through Blogger and posted on Blogspot as you did in 2001. And so let's see what we got here. Well, let's start off. This is current day. This is Daniel.industries in the current day. And this is what you get. And I did actually just redesign this using Tailwind just for grins, as I do. That'll be a lesson learned later. But here you go. Here's the still there. So actually one of my lessons learned will be inapplicable. Like if I just stayed on Blogspot, I could have had 3,000 posts on Blogspot, I guess. I don't know. This was classic, you know, early 2000s, you just word vomit. My first day I posted 5 times. I did have a more professional one, which was this one. So I'm just now noticing this interesting tagline.
Have those themes stayed with you?
A little bit, yeah. And then you can see the last post here is 2012. So I was still using this as kind of this notebook for these ideas until I integrated them. And then you can see at that point it was blog.daniels journey. Also, until recently, it was danielsjourney.com. And for grins, I changed it to daniel.industries once more TLDs became available. So shortly thereafter, though, I moved off of Blogspot. And oops, that was far too much scrolling. And SWIM has always been a non-acronym acronym. It can mean whatever I want it to mean at the time. And so actually this one I'm not sure I have open. Let's open that one. Yeah. So this looks like, so I'm suggesting that this is my 1 millionth test of trying to publish with the, at the time, capital S and capital W and lowercase I. I'm not sure why. Is this going to work? Blah, blah, blah. So this was December 3rd, 2002 was when I was transitioning from Blogspot to my own CMS. And I have some screenshots later of what that looked like. It did have these awesome permalinks. So good old query params that pointed to an XML file that was the data store, which at one point looking back, it felt naive. Now it looks like less naive. Like flat files are actually a good solution for storing data. And then, I think I was basically modeling Blogger a little bit. The Blogger URLs look a lot like that with a hash at the end to point to a particular post. This one just passes an ID.
So what was the impetus for in that year of dealing with Blogger to hop into the doing your
I
own
don't
CMS?
remember.
It just happened.
I think I'm just one of those people that always wants to do things better than themselves.
Nice.
I'm not sure. There was probably something that I wanted to do that I couldn't do with Blogger. And I was
And
like,
that
I'm a
just
software
cascaded
developer.
into doing everything. That's all.
This was kind of my first of a few different lives I've lived, and I was fun employed, had no kids. I was moving to Europe, and I was writing a lot. And so, and there was no Twitter. The blogosphere was kind of still, it was kind of mid-peak blogosphere. So at that point, I was kind of tracking how many people I had, and I had between 1,000 and 2,000 daily visitors. So the peak of Daniel's journey / Daniel.industries was 18 years ago. And then I kind of stopped worrying about analytics altogether after my first hiatus in 2004. And then, yeah, this was, as I said, pre-Twitter. It really was weblogging. There would often be like, I had this awesome lunch today posts, and you'll see the volume of posts decrease over time, specifically when Twitter arrived, and you could put that stuff on Twitter and let it disappear. But also as I kind of changed focus. All right, so let's look at a few good old Wayback Machines. Here's Daniel's journey in 2002. Classic sidebar with other people, like the classic blog roll. I don't even know how I generated this. These would be some interesting things that I'd read out there. And then this was the main content. And then let's see what else we have here. Oh, this was the first retirement in 2005. So you can see kind of what it looked like at that point. And then let's see, what's this? Okay, this is kind of the next iteration. So the homepage, there was still the blog, and I don't think if I click on that, it's going to work at all. I think the archive.org didn't really grab the /blog when it was there. But this is kind of compiling different posts from my blog, Delicious, and LiveJournal. And so I kind of moved over to LiveJournal, which I'm going to, unpopular opinion, LiveJournal was kind of the peak of functional social software until they got ironically bought by Russians, right? And I first went over there. I'll show you some of the posts I imported from LiveJournal eventually. But I was really I thought it was just for the kids, you know? And when I got in there, when I finally gave in and I was like, all right, fine, I'm gonna make a funny joke LiveJournal. And then over the course of like a couple years, like it became this really interesting, vibrant isn't the right word, but like there was something about it, like the way you could create posts that were public or only visible to a certain group of people. And you can do that on Facebook, right? But Facebook's like a mess. And LiveJournal was more focused on, I'm going to write something and then we're going to maybe talk about that, and I can kind of control my audience.
So that was like a sort of regular thing. Most people were publishing to various sets of social spheres and not just like doing the main feed public kind of thing. I've never really interacted with that.
Each one was its own little, you know, theme, right? But for example, through LiveJournal, I got to be acquaintances with the bass player from the Mountain Goats, and this was like before they were kind of like just a small indie band. This was the tour on tour, and he would put on this LiveJournal like, hey, I need a something for the merch table. Or in this case, I was here in Dallas at this point, Norman, Oklahoma, and I was like, yeah, I'll work the merch table in Norman, and I got to go hang out with the Mountain Goats and work the merch table, and that was all because of the LiveJournal. So despite having a lot of skepticism about that space, and like it was ugly, just that was the facts. But I just wanted to point that out as kind of like this. Basically, I had a lot of drama in my life, so I shut down the blog, and I kind of went, like physically, I went somewhere new. I went to a new neighborhood, and I hid out in a duplex, and then also digitally, I kind of like removed myself from my public blog and went over to this LiveJournal thing where I could kind of be more careful.
And then throughout the same point in time, you had this aggregator site pulling things from.
I did.
everywhere.
I created this aggregator like this. Let's see, is this the next one aggregator? Yeah, this is aggregator. So this is 2008. And I had some pages here, right? I had some visual art. I had writing, music. Oh, actually, that's its own website that doesn't exist anymore, johnnyscitizen.com. And then I had a design page too. So I had these pages on here that I kind of subtly linked to at the top. And then, yeah, this looks like it's still just doing an aggregation thing. And then here's another one. I only kept this up because I liked my tagline here.
Yeah.
These are tweets. Okay, at this point, I'm aggregating Twitter, so the Twitter API wasn't hamstrung. Photos from Flickr, a couple of different Flickrs. Still my blog spot here, LiveJournal, Vimeo, and Bandcamp existed at this point. 2009, nice. Okay, Bandcamp is one of those. Oh, there's also, okay, so there's these subpages and then links to elsewhere.
I don't know if you remember, but what was the kind of like for this kind of self-made site, and I imagine swim stuff as well, were you like running your own server out of your apartment, or were you hosting somewhere?
Curiously enough, I have been on DreamHost not the entire time, but almost the entire time.
Wow.
The first couple of years were on some random, back, 2001, there's lots of like random hosts, and this one went out of business dramatically. And I ended up at DreamHost. So the first couple of years, random host. There was some drama. They went out of business, and then I went to DreamHost, and I've been on there ever since.
Oh, cool.
So just simple.
And
I
to
can
this
show
day,
you the process for publishing. Yeah, I just rsync right today. I generate and rsync all in one big
nice.
rake task that I'll show you. And since 2010, I've been on Jekyll. So the scrolling here keeps getting weird. So I've been on Jekyll for over 10 years now. Basically, I had this really terrible life event. My first daughter, Margot, passed away, and I decided to blog about it in a specific space. And so I created, kind of without no thought behind it at all, but I created this subdomain 2010. This is the last post on that. And you can see I made its own design. Had its own archive. I'm not sure if that'll work here on the, let's find out. So it had its own design, it had its own subdomain. It was kind of like, yeah, it does work, look at that. So from September 2010 until November 2011, I think, I blogged only over here really. And I think a little bit maybe still on Nonlinear blogspot, that the one that wouldn't die. But mostly I was kind of in this mourning period and really just processing that. And so I did it in public, but kind of in, again, a little bit of a separate space. So that was Jekyll. That was my first experience with Jekyll. It was on the subdomain that doesn't exist anymore.
And that must have been pretty early in Jekyll's life as well, right? I think it popped up.
I'm
Right?
not sure. I'm not sure how long Jekyll's been around. It was at least a few years old at that point.
Okay.
So kind of after that time period, I came back, and that's when somewhere in here, I integrated all the things. I'm not sure. Well, we have that nonlinear post up. All right, 2012 is when I integrated nonlinear into Daniel's journey. Oops. Which one is this? It's going to take a second because it's the archive. And then sometimes they're at /blog. It's not really clear when the blog was at /blog or blog dot or just at danielsjourney.com.
What was the like? How long did that integration process take? Was it like a weekend of sitting down and going through everything, or like?
It's probably hours spread across weeks. Okay, so here's that same post, but it's on Daniel.industries now. So that's just kind of like my wrapping up that kind of chapter in terms of the blog. So yeah, moved everything back, and I somewhere in here, maybe at the same time, maybe not, I integrated all those posts that were on the subdomain into the main blog, and I sucked in all the LiveJournal posts. I think I had to do that with a WordPress stop in between. It was very, very hacked. I'm not even, I think I forget when did the Russians acquire LiveJournal? It was somewhere in that neighborhood. So I was like, ooh, get your stuff out of there quick. And then for sure at this point, because here we are in 2016. So at this point I was CTO. I was kind of trying to not highlight, especially some of the old crap on my blog, just in case a VC came by and was like, who's this guy? Posting more intentionally, Twitter. I was still on Twitter. Well, this is about the time I got off Twitter. But you can see at this point, it's just the same thing, just different designs. Okay, this is the post about swim that we can get to. And that's the behind the curtains thing. Okay, let me see where I'm at. Yeah, 2019 is when it moved to Daniel.industries, just for grins, really. And then in 2020, I created this other subdomain for fiction, which I've kind of dabbled in over the years. And I used ZOLA instead of Jekyll. And I pretty much enjoyed my experience with ZOLA. And I thought maybe I'd move the whole kit and caboodle to ZOLA, but I haven't. And I would have to kind of revisit the whole thing. But this is that site. And this is all out of date. I'm gonna actually, this is gonna go away, so don't go here. But the idea was to self-publish this fiction in a place where I could, let me minimize this. Yeah, so I could like specify this as a first draft. And, but then these markdown files turned out to be my favorite spot to really dig into longer form stuff like this. So this is going to go away.
I'm not as familiar with ZOLA. Was it just like a fun thing to try out, or was there kind of a particular thing there that was useful to you to dive into?
I'm always mucking about with different, specifically static site generators. So you can see, let's see. Yeah, here's Gatsby. So I'm like, let's learn Gatsby. Let's not learn Gatsby. Hyde was the Jekyll blog. And then here's that one. And then here's Zola. It's a Rust. It's written in Rust. It's a single executable. You just install it with brew or your package manager of choice, and then go to town. But it took a second to grok it. But it was closer to I could pattern match a little bit closer to Zola's process than I could Gatsby. And so I ended up going with Zola. Long story short. But again, that's just one example of multiple, like I messed with it, like name one and I've messed with it. And I can maybe remember my opinion about it, but maybe not. But that was the most recent one, and I might go play with it some more. It depends how active it is. I'm not sure if it was kind of feature complete, to be honest. So maybe it's not active, but still maintained. Swim, besides just being the CMS, and here, I'll just run through this really quick. Like here's original UI. This was written in Cold Fusion. So really brief version of my tech career. I got started as a trainer teaching some enterprise software that was mostly written for Microsoft enterprises for a couple years. And then the bubble burst. I lost my job with that company and I got into web. And then my first gig was with this pretty big surf shop in South Florida, and they already were running Cold Fusion. So I learned Cold Fusion, and then they needed a way to manage content on their site. So I developed this content management system that I then named Swim. And then kind of moved to PHP. Actually not, well, let's find out if we open it and look. Yeah, PHP. So I moved to PHP, kind of typical. Here you could have like infinitely nested taxonomies. Taxonomies were a big deal back then. I don't know if you remember OWL, but XML and all this was stored in XML, if I remember correctly. And then this was kind of the final CMS iteration, and I was collaborating with another, a friend, Joshua Rudd, who was director of user experience at User Voice. That was after this, but so we developed this version, which is MySQL on the back end instead of just flat files. But it had some of the same features. You could have different content types that you could specify what kind of fields there were, kind of like Contentful works. You had infinitely nestable taxonomy. You had infinitely nestable comments. Yeah, you could view and edit the taxonomy here. And then here's where you, this is how you would set up a new content type. So you could name it, and then you could specify what kind of field you'd be using to enter content into that. So I think Contentful is kind of the closest thing to that at this point. And we all kind of had to move on. But the interesting thing is kind of this guy. This is what I wanted it to be, right? I wanted it to be I wanted it to surface other content in my archive while I'm writing something. And this was kind of like just this is like a rough wireframe done in Photoshop, because that's the tool I had at the time. This would have been 2005. Yeah, 2004, 2005, I think is what the time frame here. But the funny thing is, this kind of reminds me a little bit of like this, which I love. Now these are links, right? So it's a little bit different, and same with Rome. Rome has a sidebar, and you can open blocks into it. But really, what this is essentially unlinked references feature of Rome, which I've long claimed is the killer feature of Rome, and the one that most closely maps to this vision that I had in 2005. So that was Swim. It died and it's been dead, but that was the idea. And so now I'm seeing all these new things come out and I'm like, oh yeah, they're actually doing some of that stuff. Now, if they would just, if I could tweak it just so we'll see if it resurrects or not. That was kind of the impetus for that post that I was opening all these out of. This one, I was kind of revisiting it in 2017. And I didn't really get very far. And now it's hard to navigate this, but let's go ahead and, yeah, I was on Andy's notes and just kind of, when I saw this, I was like, this is so close. This is the thing. This is the thing I wanted 15 years ago. But this is the behind the scenes thing that nobody knows about, but now you're going to know about. This is the /archives, and this is every post, all 3,500 or so of them. The fun thing to do is to like zoom out. So something like that. And you can kind of get a sense of the volume. Oh, that's as far as I can zoom out apparently. You can see they got busy with a startup right around here kind of thing. Pre-Twitter is 2007, so that's right here. So you can see there was a lot more activity pre-Twitter, and then this is the year Twitter came out. I think this longer column here is due to the LiveJournal integration. And then you can see it just kind of, last year was actually the most productive in terms of volume since 2011. Right in here is the 2010 subdomain stuff. So I was writing pretty frequently then. But then you can zoom in, zoom into where you could actually read the. So this is just the titles, but if I need to find something, I can usually remember a title. So we can easily get, well, not easily. Oh, that's zoomed in too much. It loses its columns if I zoom in too far. But we can easily get to the first post. Oh, also, oh, I think it's still not, it's still wrapping. Hang on, I have to zoom. That's why I'm zoomed at that level. So no titles in this first year, very few titles. Swim, like Blogger didn't make you write a title, so Swim didn't make you write a title. And so they're just, when I imported them into Jekyll, I had to give them a title, so I gave them an ellipsis.
So Blogger was about a year at the start. How long did Swim?
Swim was most of the OOs, and then Jekyll.
Okay.
I'm not really sure what the backend looked like, to be honest. Like I said, there was like the there's the sequester into LiveJournal. Here's the first LiveJournal. At first, all my LiveJournal posts were titled "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god" something. That was me making fun of it, or they were just like, yeah, post 61. They're all mixed in here. Here we go. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Post 1, post 2. And they're all kind of mocking the young kids that I perceive to be the progenitors of the LiveJournal culture. No idea. Yeah, here, yeah, more. Anyway, so this is a fun little nostalgic thing for me to, and if I need to find something like when I was sending Maggie links to like this stuff where I linked to the streams and gardens thing. Where did it go? Oh, this was one of my highlights. This was on the Nonlinear blog spot. So right before I kind of retired that one, and Stuart Butterfield tweeted a link to this, and that was the other like high point. And I actually like got to like go back and forth with him on Twitter a little bit. I have another funny story where I ran into him in Portland, and I was really drunk, so I thought we were good friends, and embarrassed myself. But anyway, so that's kind of how I go back. It's, you know, it's not great. It's no Rome, but if I need to find something from 2001, I can. I can also just go in to here, right? The main problem with having 3,000 posts is when you open the posts directory in Jekyll, like there's the first one, but to get to the most recent one, I have to like spin my mouse and let it let it go, because there's just a lot. But I could just search in here for something too. And that's part of the lessons learned I'll get to, is like flat files are awesome because any old text editor can open 3,000 of them, and you can just go find in folder, and you can just, you know, find whatever you want, you know. Like when you just post Rage Against the Machine lyrics to your blog in 2002, for example. All right, so let me move on to process. That was the fun history lesson, embarrassing history of my blog. Right now, I've always kind of had this process where there's a private, there's semi-public, and then there's public, right? And so you kind of saw some of that. LiveJournal allowed for both public and semi-private and private, which was maybe when I keep talking about LiveJournal, some kind of like subconscious thing I haven't thought about in a long time. So I just moved to Dendron for the private notes. That's actually what this is. This is my daily journal for today in Dendron. This used to just be a folder with markdown files, and I had a Ruby script, and so I would just run the Ruby script and it would generate a new file for that day with a template. So pretty similar to my current Dendron, although Dendron has additional features that I'm not exploiting yet. A long time ago, I had a private movable type blog. So there you go. You're asking, like, I've used them all. Movable type, I mean, you name it, I've used it. Then semi-public, like I said, has been various things. There was this site that I was writing on called 200 Words a Day. That was retired at the end of last year. And now this friend of mine is created this one. I think it's still invite only. I'm not sure, but it's basically just, you know, just write. And so that's kind of semi-public. There's this nice feature that 200 Words didn't have, which is tribes. So there's just the three of us are sharing short fiction in here, and that's kind of nice. And then public is the blog, obviously. What I find is the blog, like I showed you that /archives that just literally has all the posts, and the folder that just has all the posts, and they're all on GitHub, so they're relatively safe. I find that that is the archive, and so I will eventually move stuff onto the blog, like when I integrated other platforms content, and now I have silly oh my god posts on my blog, but I don't care because they're so hard to get to. No normal person who doesn't know about that archives page can get to them. And so it's kind of like it's the archive. So some stuff I'll push in there later. So I have this rake file. Stand by. Let's close posts because it gets in the way. I don't even have a gem file. My blog runs on 3 gems, including Jekyll, but I do have a rake file that I'm not going to open because it shows the rsync. Not my password, but but enough that I don't want to bring it up. But I have basically these few rake tasks that I got from Octopress. So when I first started using Jekyll, I used this version. It wasn't really a version of Jekyll. It was just like Jekyll plus plus, and it had all these utilities. And so I've hung on to that, just the rake file, none of the other stuff, just the rake file, because it had some cool stuff where you can make a new post. You can isolate, which is important when you have 3,000 posts, back when Jekyll was slow. And then basically the deploy, which is just for me rsync. And then I wrote this Ruby script that goes onto that archive page, pulls a random post off of it, and gives me the link to it, and then logs it into a text file so it doesn't ever show me that one again. And then I can go in and that's how I garden. I can show you this. If it runs. Yeah. So I can just go there if I hold down command. And I can go, is this interesting at all? What's broken? Because one of the things with having a blog over 19.5 years is all your images are going to break. All your cool links to something that was awesome in 2003, it's not there anymore. It's kind of sad, but like, the farther you go back, the more chances are something I linked to that's not on this site is going to be broken. And so there's just a lot of deleting old posts. And I actually have like a dead link style now that I use to indicate, so that I wouldn't just delete it. I'd be like, here's the thing, here's what it was called, here's whatever text I put around my link to it, but it's just so you know, you can't click on it anymore. So that's that. That's kind of the, so I created a new one, and then I can go well, if we just do that, that's going to be 2 posts. So now if I look in posts, not posts, there's 2 posts in there, because I said move everything else to the stash, basically, if you think about it that way. In fact, I think the folder is called _stash, and the script just moves everything that you didn't specify in that parameter, and then you can just do that, and now they're all there. So those are these, that's the process. It's really lightweight, but it is does take a little bit of command line foo to operate. So that's that. I don't even remember what the ZOLA I can't even tell you what the process for that was. So that's the nuts and bolts.
I do have one question on the like current site. Did the like massive archive versus like only showing first and or previous and next post sort of dichotomy appear recently, once you were sort of dealing with having all that history in one place, or was that always a kind of separation?
Yeah, like I said, somewhere around the time I was like, oh, I'm an executive at a funded startup. Like, you saw what I searched for. The word I searched for when I searched in VS Code. Maybe I don't, there's no need to spend a lot of time eradicating things from the internet, but let's just not make it so easy to find.
Just put a little friction. Yeah.
I mean, I was 20 something.
It's a really good solution to it. Yeah.
Also, like, there might be, and that's the other reason I have the random thing. Like that's my gardening kind of process. It's actually the opposite. More often I'll find something that's really old, that's more, a proper post, and I'll be like, this is still me. But just in case I said something really stupid, I'll go back and change history. Actually, that might segue to lessons learned, unless you have another question.
No, go for it.
We'll do this. We'll do this from the bottom. Don't feel bad for revising history. It's your story to tell, you know. Archive.org, they can have, you know, they have the, if anyone really wants to go dig around in archive.org, it's there, whatever. It's very, it's, there's enough friction there that I'm not worried about it. And then I introduced, as you said, my own friction on my own website. But yeah. Also, don't feel bad for constantly redesigning, especially if you're like me and that's something that relaxes you. And then also don't feel bad if you're constantly fiddling with your tools or process. Nothing wrong with that. I kind of, for 2021, I was like, I'm just going to be okay. Like, I also fiddle with my productivity process a lot. And I've decided to just be okay with that and not feel bad when I jump around from tool to tool or process to process. All right. I have to minimize you all so I can see everything I wrote. Number one benefit of maintaining your own blog for 19 and a half years is for your own personal benefit, not for your, you know, professional, whatever you want to call it, or your brand. It's for you remembering, for you learning about yourself over the course of almost a couple decades, and especially for nostalgia. You know, it's the diary aspect of the whole thing is the most valuable thing I find over time. Hosting yourself is really useful. It does require the tiniest bit of tech savvy, but over a long enough time scale, all blog hosts will go away, as will your host, but you can move your stuff if you're hosting it yourself. And then this one, avoid databases if at all possible. So I still have a few that are just database, like MySQL dumps, and I've never resurrected those, right? Flat files are awesome because they're searchable from a text editor, as I showed you. You can do mass edits from a text editor. So when I changed to Daniel.industries, I could go change every single internal link from danielsjourney.com to Daniel.industries. That requires some regex foo. So you got a little bit extra tech savvy required. And then also static site generators that use flat files do require some additional kind of development environment and coding, which leads to the next lesson learned, which is avoid dependencies. In all tooling, I told you this is only 3 gems, including the Jekyll gem, and get ZOLA. ZOLA is just a single REST app. So unpopular opinion, I told you I messed around with Gatsby and gave up on it in about one evening. At about one evening and about 300 dependencies later, I decided that that's fine for some people, but not for me. Here we are with the dead links talk. In my humble opinion, keeping links working is one of the most important things you can do if you're publishing on the web. If you let a link break without forwarding it, you're doing a disservice to the future. I have plenty of broken links like that index.php ? File equals XML, you know, those are all broken. I should go fix those. But I feel pretty good having stuck to the same Jekyll URL schema for a while now. And at least being able to fix links inside my blog. And then also, hopefully, I'll have a decent search to where if you do get a 404 on Daniel.industries, you'll get a search interface and say, what were you trying to find? But most of when I get a random journey post and I'm gardening, there's so many dead links. Just dead links are this kind of artifact of the internet that I think an unintentional kind of artifact. And it's almost like, you know, if you're digging through, like someone someone wrote a handwritten book and you found it and you're like, this is amazing. This is the history of some important historical moment. And then like 10 pages in, it just goes blank, you know? That's what it's like. And you're like, what happened? So anyway, that's my like little soapbox to jump back off of now. Do err on the side of posting. Drafts get lost. So Jekyll has a drafts folder. I have maybe 10 in there. I don't, if I start a post, I try to finish it. Personal note systems will change. Nobody really cares what you put on your blog, end of the day. Yeah, I was careful. I am sort of careful, but no one really cares. It's the big secret. Asterisks, assuming you're a normal person, you know. And then cool people might email you about a post from 19 years ago. So I recently got an email from an academic. I didn't dig it up. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, even though it was only 6 months ago. He was like, I stumbled across your writing on nonlinear narratives. And I was like, my what? And that's what I started writing. That's why I started nonlinear.blogspot.com. And he like sent me one of my own links on my own website and was like, I want to talk about this stuff. And I was like, okay, give me a minute to dig that back out of my gray matter. Let me go reread my own posts about it. But we had a really fun conversation. And turns out I'm one of the few people that ever wrote about that kind of thing on the internet. Like there's just not a lot of prior art about how one writes a nonlinear narrative or anybody who's written about or thought about writing nonlinear narratives. So yeah, cool moments can happen. And yeah, I started at the end, so we're at the end. The end of the talk.
That was awesome. Yeah. Does anyone here have any questions or things they'd like to dive into? Yeah, I had a couple things, but floor if anyone wants it, or you can just drop it in the chat.
I don't have chat open. Let me open it.
I'll jump in with one. I can't believe I haven't asked you before, but did you go through a Ted Nelson Xanadu phase when you were imagining them?
Yes. And what's the prior art for that? The Manhattan Project guy.
Vannevar Bush and the
Yes, I went through all of that. Yes. So when you recently wrote much more eloquently about all of that history, I was like, there's the post, the A to Z post, you know,
Yeah.
history of this whole scene. I don't know what you want to call it, but
That was similar to my question, which was while you were doing the swim work with that other friend of yours, was it like motivated by a lot of your personal opinions on how the whole thing should function as informed by blogging and things like that? Or was it kind of...
Yeah, at that point, it wasn't informed by all this prior art like Xanadu and the Van Bush. Let's just call him Bush. It wasn't at that point, but yeah, like I said, I'm a tinkerer. You know, I use a tool and I'm like, this would be so much better if it was 5% different. Now tools are a little more hackable. Back then it was, you know, just start again from scratch. I mean, writing your own CMS is like the classic first web developer project, right? So my career was no different.
I think that's evolved a little into writing your own static site generator now. Where there's
Right.
just like 10,000 of them. Yeah.
I've been, I don't know if I'd say I've enjoyed, but I've consistently been just ever so in front of the curve. Like I started using a static site generator in 2010, you know, and now it's like, that's the only thing you'd use. I'm like, well.
Yeah, there's like an interesting trend with all the headless CMS stuff coming around that like it's somewhat pointing to it being a full circle kind of thing.
There's a lot of full
Contentful and-
circles, turns
yeah.
out.
Oh yeah.
You have so much stuff here. Have you ever thought of archiving it even for like, I don't know, your kids to see, your grandkids to see? Like, I'm always, I guess now I've been interested in like, how do I archive my own words for, you know, other, not so much like other people, but like, I don't know, people I care about. Like if I want my wife to know what the heck I've been writing for the past, you know, maybe I don't want her to know what I've been writing for the past, you know, year or two, but just like some kind of more, I don't know, making it into a book or I don't know, archiving them in some kind of durable way.
Oops. Yes. This post, thinking about our posthumous digital lives. So I had a friend who died, and he was part of that ecosystem in the early to mid noughts, and where the blogosphere was kind of new and fun and lots of interaction between indie sites. And I was subscribed to his RSS feed, and then after he died, a new post popped into the RSS feed. And I was like, well, and as I explained in this post, like there were some other people that happened, and their wives would post to their blog, you know, a year later, you know, kind of remembering. And I thought that's what it was, but it wasn't. Someone had, his domain had expired. A different person with the same name had picked it up and was posting about something else entirely. And the RSS endpoint was the same. So my RSS reader picked up his stuff, and it was very jarring. And that's what led to this post. That's another reason I like just text files, you know, and they're on multiple hard drives. They're on GitHub. Obviously someone would have to pay the domain, the Dream, right now DreamHost bill, which is an annual thing, for that to stay up. But it's a big question. Now, interestingly, my parents for Christmas created a book, and they used Shutterfly or whatever. It's like a decent, like 2020, we can make decent books from Shutterfly. And it was so interesting. And they actually, you know, for theirs, it was combing through banker boxes full of crap from the last 100 years. And it was really cool. So yes, I hope that somehow there will be a way to preserve digital artifacts far past my own existence. But on the other hand, I'm like, meh. Here, I can post this in the chat.
Thanks.
Yeah, I linked this New York Times article too that talks about this stuff.
That seems like a pretty nice point to end off, unless anyone has anything else they'd like to dive into, or right up on the hour.
Memento mori to finish it up.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. That was a wild ride.
Thanks for having me.
A lot to think about. Yeah, thank you all for coming.